engine here, you can see it's not too awful bad. You can see the fresh gasket, but we've got a little bit of dirty oil and sludge in there. Next thing we're going to do is go over here to the carburetor, take the fuel line off on these carburetor engines. Make sure you support that big nut going into the carburetor so you don't damage it. Take a tubing wrench when you're loosening these fittings. That way you don't round off the tubing nuts.
All right, next we're going ahead and remove the carburetor. Now, a good tip for you here, folks. Once you remove the carburetor, don't go and tip it upside down, because if you do, you're going to dump any of the dirt that's settled in the bottom of the bowl right down to the jets.
Now the carburetor's out of the way, what we can go ahead and do is pull the intake manifold.
All right, now we got our bolts out of our intake manifold. Now the next step is to try to pop it up. Thank you, Sam. And here's a little trick for you. Instead of trying to wedge a screwdriver down there where you could damage the surfaces, take your wooden block like this, put it right under the edge, and tap it like that, and that'll break it loose. Okay, yeah. Now, once you get your manifold up, what you want to do is you want to make sure you get it good and clean before you put it on your new engine. The one thing that people overlook is this area right here, this plate. This is chock full of carbon, and if you clean it all off and don't remove that and clean it, then you stand a good chance of contaminating a new engine. So we'll take it over to the bench and I'll show you what I'm talking about.
Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and remove the exhaust manifolds, and I'm going to start by putting a little penetrant, a little liquid wrench on all of the studs. That way we won't get any of the studs to break, hopefully, and we'll get all the nuts off and you won't round anything off. Now remember, when you got your exhaust manifold off, while you've got it on the bench in your hand, clean it up, and if the studs go into the downpipe look bad, that's the time to change them, not when you put it back in the car and end up wringing them off. Do it while you got it in your hand.
All right, now, folks, we're getting our manifold here all cleaned up. And you can see we got a lot of work ahead of us here. We got a lot of grunge in here, but this part right here, this is the important area. This is that pan that collects a lot of carbon and stuff, and it's held on by these 4 little pins right here. Now, these pins will pop out, and once I pop them out, I like to drill it out and tap it so I can put a bolt in there to hold it. Now, a lot of guys will use these pins over and just put some Loctite on it, but I'd rather be safe than sorry.
Okay, now, what I'm doing here is I'm moving the rest of the exhaust manifold. Now, when you get your exhaust manifolds off, don't forget what I told you. Check all the studs where the manifold hooks to the downpipe. If they're bad, now's the time to change them, okay? Before you get it in the car, and then you're trying to wrestle with it in the car. Now I'm going to go ahead and go on to the front, start taking all our accessory brackets up. I'll start right here with our water pump pulley. Okay, with the water pump pulley off, we can go right to start removing our brackets for the air pump assembly. Okay, once we go after that, we can go ahead and take our alternator brackets off, then go after our water pump. All this stuff comes off the same way. Okay, now what we're doing is removing the engine's oil pan. Now, you want to keep all your bolts together. Like I said, here's a tip. On the front, where I took off all the accessory brackets for the alternator and the air pump and so on, there's studs, they're bolts, they're all different lengths. Make sure you keep them all with the brackets so you know exactly where they're going, because there's no diagrams anywhere to tell you where they're going. Now, the oil pan should come right off. Usually, sometimes they're a little stuck. Just tap on the corners. Break it loose. It's on some studs. And then we'll go ahead and pull this oil pan off. It's a little tricky sometimes to get up off the studs. And the gaskets will hang. They have all kinds of good stuff. And this is where the sludge and dirt's going to live. This one isn't too bad, but they'll get pretty nasty. And what we're trying to do here, of course, we'll need to take off the oil pump, take off the oil pump screen, take out the oil pump drive shaft, and so on. We're trying to get this engine down to where it's exactly like what the replacement engine looked like when we took it off the pallet. Then we're going to bolt this engine onto the pallet and send it back as a core.
Okay, now, folks, this is what we were talking about. When we took that pan off, you can see all this carbon built up underneath there. And if we put this on a brand new engine, all this stuff can filter back through the engine, and this stuff can destroy it.
Hey, buddy, look at this oil pan. It's really pretty nasty inside.
Well, it looks like we got a lot of work on that, but I've saved us some time.
Okay.
I got a brand new chrome oil pan for us.
All right, great. Well, listen, if you don't have a brand new oil pan, if you're using your old one over, make sure you get it inside, under all the baffles and stuff. Get it clean enough to eat out of.
Well, we've got a lot more work here to do to clean up these parts. In the meantime, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to start putting all the new parts on the engine, so stay with us.
Look at this stuff.
It's going to take a while to clean this thing. Be sure to pre-oil the engine completely to avoid dry start engine damage on a replacement engine. Hey, welcome back to ShadeTree Mechanic. You know, Sam mentioned earlier about returning the core. Well, there's one important step that you always want to remember. When you get your new remanufactured engine in the valley, you're going to find a bag, and in it is this core return claim check. You want to make sure you return that with the old core, because this is just like money.
Now, the first step in getting our engine set to go is we install the oil pump. I put the oil pump in, and there's a little plastic sleeve on it that you engage the oil pump drive shaft that runs off the bottom of the distributor. Now, also, I put a new oil pump pickup screen. Maybe the old ones, they get sludged up, and you can't clean inside of them. Now, what I've done is I've taken the cover off here. If you want to take a little clean grease, you can use some petroleum jelly, you can use some grease, and what you want to do is just pack these gears really good. Now, when you get them packed, what that'll allow it to do is to build up the suction to pick up the oil. Not as critical on this type of a pump as it is on a pump that's mounted like in the front cover on a 231 Buick motor or a 252 motor. If you don't pack those, they'll run dry. Now, this cover goes back on, we'll install the bolts, and then we'll torque them to factory specifications.
All right, now we're ready to install our chrome timing cover, and we've got our gasket on here and a new seal. But before we do, we want to make sure we rotate our timing gears around to make these marks line up. Now we see they're lined up, we know that our cam timing is correct. We'll just go ahead and mount up our cover. All right, next we're going to install the oil pan. As you can see, we've already glued our gaskets down to the block. Now, you want to make sure you don't overdo the sealant. Slide it on like so.
Okay, now, if you've ever put a fuel pump in a Chevrolet V8 in the car, you know how this fuel pump push rod that's driven by the cam, it can be real obnoxious. Now, I've got the engine upside down, but you can see how easy that falls in and out of there. Well, when you've got the engine in the car in the right way, that thing keeps falling down and getting in your way. Here's the trick. Put some grease on the end of it, okay, like that. Then go ahead and just stuff it down inside there. Now the grease will hold it up. That way you can change your pump. I've already glued our gasket on, and here's our fuel pump cover that goes on over this little bracket on the engine. By the way, these AC Delco remanufactured engines come with a complete engine overhaul gasket set. Now, when you put these bolts in, don't tighten them up all the way. Just get them started so you can line up your fuel pump bolts. You got your push rod down. And now we can go ahead and install. Of course, we got this nice dress-up AC Delco chrome fuel pump. You put the pump in here like that. And you want to make sure the pump's on top of the plunger like I just got it. Put in your bolts and tighten it up. You're all set to go. Okay, buddy, roll it up there. A little bit more, a little bit more.
Right there?
Yeah, that's good. Lock it down. Okay, now we're getting ready to put our intake manifold gaskets on. First thing you want to do is take some RTV silicone sealer. Now, we're using this 3M black sealer because we have a oxygen sensor engine here. We want to be oxygen sensor safe. You want to start about 1/2 inch up the head and put a nice bead across the front of the intake like this. This is going to seal the intake where it meets the block. Come all the way across here like so. This stuff's sometimes a little bit tough to get out of the tube. Okay, make sure you use a good fresh silicone sealer like this. Get it about 1/2 inch up the head and do the same thing in the back. Now, when you get this stuff on here, okay, you want to start right at the top of the head, about 1/2 inch up the head like this. Then you want to come all the way across the back. And you want to make sure in the back here particularly, you get a good bead across here, because if the back of the intake manifold doesn't seal properly and it leaks oil, sometimes that gets misdiagnosed as a rear main bearing oil seal when it's just the intake gasket. Again, I come up the corner here, right up there about 1/2 inch. Now we're ready for our gaskets.
Okay.
Get those glued up.
Here you go. Got them already glued.
Great.
That side there.
Okay, these things are marked this side up. We've got a little 3M weather strip adhesive. You set it down into the back of the silicone like this. Push them down in place. You can see Dave's doing the same thing over there. Once this is all in place and set up, then we can install our intake.
Okay, next we'll install the intake manifold. Make sure you get it lined up properly. Set it down. And then when you install your bolts, be sure you torque them to specifications. Also, don't overlook the opportunity to install a brand new thermostat. Okay, next we'll install our chrome valve covers. These come from the AC Delco dress-up kit. It really sets off the engine. Spreaders also are included. Now, you want to make sure that you don't over-tighten your nuts. Okay, we've got our new water pump on, and we've also installed an alternator, our air pump. We've got the front end pretty well all buttoned up. Looks pretty good, doesn't it, Sam?
Looks great. Looks absolutely great. Okay, the next step is to set our distributor in place so we have our distributor ready to go when we're ready to start the engine up, and we won't have to mess around with the timing too much. Now, Dave's got the engine set. Where are you, Dave?
Okay, I've rolled it around here till we're on top dead center on the #1 cylinder. That's on the compression stroke.
Great. Get your #1 on compression. Now, the distributor, we know the relative position from the wire harness goes in like this. When we took it out, we marked it. If you look at your distributor cap, #1 on the Chevrolet is somewhere around the 10, 11 o'clock position. Looking down on it from here, set your distributor down and push your rotor down like that. You just rotate it, and when it goes in, you want to pull it back and make sure you get it down the right place. If it doesn't set all the way down, you're not engaging the oil pump drive shafts. You can take a long screwdriver and just turn it a little bit. Okay, once you get that set in place, then you can put your clamp on and hold the distributor down. Hey, coming up there, buddy.
I got it, Sam. We're all set.
Good.
Folks, what we're doing in here is we're getting ready to take the most important step that you can take to eliminate a dry start on a fresh engine, and that is to pre-oil it. Now, the common method of doing that is to take out the distributor, put a shaft down there into the oil pump, hook an electric drill to it, spin it around, and pressurize the system. But we're going to try something a little different. This is a pressure engine oiler, and what I've done, I've hooked a fitting up here to this outlet, and Sam's got one down there. How's it going, Sam?
Doing great. Okay, now, yeah, what I've done is I've hooked up a mechanical oil pressure gauge to this gallery right here. Got the gauge, I'm going to set it right on our oil tank here. Now, this tank's got air and oil in it, and got a valve. When I open the valve, now the air pressure in the tank is going to start forcing the oil. You can see it going through the lines, and of course, there comes our oil pressure. The gauge is coming up. We're oiling the crankshaft, we're filling the filter, we're oiling the camshaft, the lifters, the whole thing.
And again, folks, this is the most important step that you can take when you start up a fresh engine. How's it going?
Doing great down here, bud. Come on out, yeah, come on, come on.
Oh, hold it right there.
That's
Let me
good right there.
get
Okay.
hooked up over here.
Now, we're installing our remanufactured engine just like you do at home, but make sure you don't go ahead and bypass the radiator. We sent ours out to a radiator shop because you don't want to put a new engine, a fresh engine, behind an old radiator, make it overheat. Also replace all the belts and hoses, make all that stuff new.
Now, folks, you can see we've got a lot of used parts around here that we've taken off this engine, but by the same token, we've also used a lot of the same parts because they're serviceable. But you do want to make sure you take off some of these that have got short life on them, like the water pump, for instance, and the fuel pump, and you can replace these with remanufactured parts. And if you do, make sure that you take the old part, put it back in the box that the remanufactured part came in so you can get your core charge back.
And we're also going to take the old engine, crate it back on the pallet, and the crate that it came in is send it back. Don't forget your core return tag, because this is just like cash to get your core charge back.
That's a good point. Well, we're going to take a short break, but in the meantime, we're going to go ahead and drop in our engine, and when we come back, we're going to fire it up and show you some new products, so stay with us. When installing a replacement engine, be sure to include new tune-up parts, such as spark plugs, wires, and distributor cap. Hey, welcome back to ShadeTree Mechanic. Well, I told you we were going to fire up our engine. Sam, you ready?
Let's go, bud.
Let's
Go
see
ahead.
what we've got.
Crank it up. There we go.
Good.
Okay, now the first thing you want to do when you get one of these things started up after you put a reman engine in is go ahead and get it up to 1,500 to 2,000 RPM to break your cam in.
That's a good point. It sounds terrific, doesn't it?
It sounds great.
Now, folks, anytime you're installing an engine like this, you're more likely going to drop some parts or nuts and bolts. Well, we've got a solution to get them, and that's this flexible magnet. Now, you've seen these before, but what makes this a little bit different is the end will extend like this. So if you want to pick up something like that, then you can drop it off just like that. It makes it a lot easier. This is from Griot's Garage. Costs about $20, and it can save you some time.
Nice tool. Remember, you can get these AC Delco remanufactured engines at any of your AC Delco parts houses or your GM dealer.
Well, once again, we've run out of time, but we'll see you again next time here on ShadeTree Mechanic. What can I do to help you out here, Sam? If you would like more information about the products you've seen on today's show or to purchase a VHS copy of this episode, call 1-800-682-TREE or write to the address on your screen. Please refer to the offer number shown. Tapes are $15.95 plus $3.50 shipping and handling. Remember, 1-800-682-TREE.